Hello, welcome to World Sustainable Procurement Day 2024. Although I suspect many of you have already been on for many hours. This is my first hour. Normally I'm here for a lot of it, but yeah, I'm calling in from the US. I'm very excited to see all the messages of support that have been coming in and LinkedIn lighting up. So thank you for all of your support to everyone. My name is Oliver Hurry. I'm on the steering team of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, amongst other things. And yeah, delighted to be running this session. So welcome. A few bit of a housekeeping before we get started, and then I'll introduce my speakers, and then ultimately we'll get on with the session all about Scope 3 and the toolkit and the tools that are critical for you to be seeing and using. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So what are we doing today? So for this session, we really wanted to tap into the planet theme. So those that have been tuning in to World Sustainable Procurement Day are probably aware that there are three themes to World Sustainable Procurement Day that we're tracking. One is planet, one is people, and one is the profession of procurement. We think all three are critical to actually managing better sustainable procurement practices. So we need those three lenses to look through. We also wanted to make sure we had a range of tools and a range of sessions and a range of insights. And this session is an equip session. What does that mean? That means you're just going to get tools. You're going to get bombarded with tools and templates, guides, and suggestions of where to go. If you look into the resources tab of the session, you'll see lots of links. You'll see lots of documents. All of that in there is for you to download. So get downloaded, get clicking while you're listening to all of this. And all of the speakers' information is in there, including the slides for this session, if you look carefully as well. We think this session is roughly for an intermediate level, but to be honest, no one really knows what they're doing on Scope 3, as I often say. So don't worry. If you're a beginner or if you're more advanced, there's plenty for you to be taking part in on this today. So the session will be recorded, obviously. A lot of people ask that. It'll all be on YouTube ultimately. And we want lots of interaction and questions, so do use the chat function. If you can ask the questions in the Q&A box, that would be preferable. But you can also use the chat box as well. The speakers will be answering some of the questions as we go as well. Don't forget to spread the word online. So, it is about spreading the word on sustainable procurement, getting your peers and your colleagues involved. So your responsibility isn't just to listen and learn, it's to share as well. So use the hashtag collaborate to accelerate, but also share on LinkedIn. And if you find something or hear something that you think is useful, pass it on. That's very, very, very important. So who have we got here today? So what I've done is through my work on Scope 3, both with the SPP, but also the Scope 3 peer group that I chair, I've come across lots and lots of free resources and tools available that are really useful for procurement professionals and all professionals on the challenge of supply chain decarbonisation. So I've curated a very fantastic panel, I think, of people that I know very well who are doing some fantastic work and have all got free resources for you to be able to choose. So we've got Jamie Ganderton, the Vice President at Proxima, who's helped develop the Scope 3 benchmark, which is a free resource that you're going to hear more about in a second. We've got Louise Rebender, who's the Director at Exponential Roadmap Initiative, who has wonderful experience at Ericsson and is also going to be sharing all the resources of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, including the Supplier Action Guide, which is excellent. We've got Diane from WBCSD, two speakers from WBCSD, but Diane's going to be sharing more on the climate drive, an extraordinary resource of all the best practice case studies on net zero and ultimately on Scope 3. So a great resource for you and your suppliers. We also have Nicolas from the WBCSD, who works on the Climate Transparency Programme, or the Partnership for Climate Transparency, or PACT as it's known, which is an incredibly important programme to help align on data standards on Scope 3 as well. And last but definitely not least, we have Alessandro from BASF and Together for Sustainability, the Chemicals Collaboration, who are absolutely leading on product carbon footprint guidelines and are creating those to be sharing with the rest of the world. So a brilliant panel. We definitely don't have a huge amount of time. So we're going to be rattling through this session. The speakers are promised to be quick. All the resources, as I said, are in the links there. So there's plenty for you to be reading and watching and listening. But Jamie, I think we'll start with you.
Wonderful. Can you see my screen all right?
We can.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much and welcome everyone. As Ollie said, I'm James Ganderton. I'm a VP of Sustainable Procurement at Proxima. We are a procurement consultancy. We're part of Bain & Company, and I'm going to be kicking off today's session talking about the Scope 3 maturity benchmark. As I said, this is a free tool that we've developed about 2 years ago and did so alongside a number of different organisations as part of the Scope 3 peer group. I'm going to take you through some facts about where we are with the benchmark, some of its successes. Then I'll take you through some of the background, why we created it, how does it work, why is it useful, and how does the insights get prepared back for you? And then most importantly, if you haven't taken the benchmark already, how can you access it and what will you get from it? So, as I said, about 18 months ago, we released it. And since that point, we've had well over 150 large global organizations take the benchmark. The total completions total up to $2.6 trillion of revenue, almost the GDP of France, and covers about 7.8 million people in those employees, which is about the total population of Laos. Most of these organizations some of these organizations have taken it twice. So not only are we pinpointing where they are on their maturity journey, we're also able to then give some comparisons to where these organizations are moving forward and the progress that they're making. So why did we create it? Well, there were two burning questions that were coming through loud and clear. Most people really wanted to know, well, what should I do next? How should I organize my team? What should I be doing? And where should I be going? They wanted to understand, well, what are other organizations doing to try and tackle Scope 3? And then two other fundamental questions. How much are they investing? And how many people do they have in their team? So we set about thinking, how could we start to try and pull together a tool that would be useful and insightful, not a report that sat in a drawer, but something that people could actually use to really drive change within their organizations. We did so by pulling together a qualitative maturity framework. So we sat down with about 40 different companies and they told us what was important to them and why did they need to understand this information. With that, we built out a 7-pillar operating model across strategy, organization, people, process, supplier engagement, data and technology, etc. And then what we did was we sat down and interviewed all of these organizations to understand what did they do when they first started the journey, what are they doing today, and where are they going in the future? And once we calibrated all of that, we were then able to build out our overall maturity framework. Now, this enables us to then pinpoint, when you take the assessment, where do you stand relative to that framework? And then more importantly, once we convert that into a numeric score, we can tell you where you stand relative to your peers and relative to the leading organizations in the benchmark. We've also overlaid this with some quantitative ratios. So that question number 2 you see at the bottom left-hand screen, we've now developed out some metrics which enable you to compare how much other organizations are investing relative to your organization's size and how many people do they have in their team. We've been able to then start to provide much more insights based on how other organizations are performing and what are the fundamental differences between the middle of the pack and the organizations that are leading the way. So how do you access it? Well, one of the fundamental things, apart from providing this as a free resource, was to make this as easy and as accessible as possible. So what we've done is we've put our assessment onto an easy online platform. We send you a link which enables you and any of your colleagues to start to collaborate on that submission. Once you click submit, it takes about 45 minutes to complete it. What we'll do is we anonymize all of the data and then we pull that into an individual personalized report. And we provide some insights, not just about the 7 core pillars, but 27 different core components of the benchmark. And as a thank you for spending your time completing it, we also provide 5 next best actions, some recommended things on what you could do differently and how you can start to accelerate change within your organization. This is one of those starting points in building that transformation roadmap that's really going to start to accelerate change in the organization. So why do it? Well, firstly, there are some individual benefits. Obviously, it's free. It's quick and easy to complete. you get some personalized suggestions on what to do differently. And also, many of our organizations have actually used the data that has been provided to them to start building business cases, and they've secured additional headcount off the back of it and secured additional resources and budget. In addition, we're now providing insights back at a sector level. And we've done this across multiple different sectors, the pharmaceutical sector, financial services, and others. And what we're able to now start to think about is providing much more specific peer-on-peer comparisons. So we're not providing comparisons to retailers versus consumer products, for example. What this also does is actually provides the leading organizations in a sector to start helping provide insights to those that are starting to catch up. Collectively, by sharing insights at a sector level, we're able to help systematically raise collective industry standards. So in summary, this is a free resource which has been helping multiple organizations really accelerate change within their organization. You can access it at scope3benchmark.com. We'll send you a link and you can complete it. We'll then send you a report and you can start building your plan about how you're going to accelerate change within your organizations. Thank you. Hopefully kept
Excellent, Jamie. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. There is a link now in the chat. It looks like so many people clicked on scope3benchmark.com that it now doesn't work. But if you use the link in the chat now, you can access it there as well. But it is a fantastic resource. And as I said, huge thanks to Proxima for developing it and for providing it free of charge to everyone. It is a fantastic resource. Excellent. So now next up, Louise, who has been doing this for some time and has been providing tools for some time. So Louise, over to you.
Thank you so much. And you can see my screen, I hope.
We can. Beautiful.
Great. And that is a great tool that Jamie presented. The first thing I did when I started working a few years back with supplier engagement was just the benchmarking, knowing what was going on, what were others doing, and so on. So a great tool. So I'll be talking about supplier engagement, and I'll actually go into one specific area of supplier engagement, and that is supporting your suppliers, because your work will be so much easier when you're also supporting those that you're engaging with. But first, so you know who you're talking to, you are talking to me at Exponential Roadmap Initiative, an organization that works really tightly with quite a small group of large organizations, small organizations, but first and foremost, very ambitious organizations, innovators, transformers, and disruptors. That's the type of organizations we want to work with. And also others within policy and governance, and also research, trying to make sure that all can talk the same language, because it's not always easy. And these are some of the companies that we're working with. As I said, large and small all are welcome. But right now, I'll take us to a little bit of a higher level. I like to do that. So from our day-to-day work, let's step up a little bit to the overview of what we're doing. There are 330 million companies in the world, so it's a bunch of companies. Much more than 90% are small and medium-sized enterprises. So we need to consider that when we're working in our supply chain. And most probably it looks maybe more or less the same in your supply chain. So you need to think about that when engaging with suppliers. It could be that you have 10 suppliers, but not very likely, because that's very little, maybe 1,000, 5, 10, 100,000 suppliers, something like that, or more. And something that I want to point out to those not working in procurement, that is, so the supply chain is not really a chain, because you think of one-to-one relationship. It's more of a web or a network, or very messy. It is a big, huge connected network that spans across the world that we're also tied into, which makes it hard to work, but it also gives a lot of possibilities. And when you're working with procurement, it's maybe the best place to be when you want to take climate action, because you have the one-to-many relationship. So when you do something, you engage your suppliers, you can reach out to so many companies at the same time. And if they start working, you can amplify the work of your company with maybe 10 or 100 if you get your suppliers working too. So it's pretty fantastic. You can sleep well at night. But this also makes us want to align how we work. That's why I talk so much about supplier engagement and asking your suppliers to also set targets that are aligned with the 1.5 degree ambition, so that if everyone asks that, it will be easier for the suppliers to act and also for you to engage with your suppliers. So that type of alignment or similar type of alignment within a sector or cross sector, it will make life easier. But then also we need to make it as simple as possible, and that's what I want to get to today. Not working with me, this PDF. All right. So when you cascade your climate action in your supply chain, you're going to communicate with your suppliers somehow. You should make sure to give support to your suppliers straight away in that initial communication. If you say, I want you to have a 1.5 degree line target, which I said many, many times, or if it's about renewable energy, you need to give the suitable support for suppliers, because you need to think about every time, or I needed to, that the asking, even if that is tricky, it's so much easier than the actual doing. Please set the target and plan and act, and then the other one has to actually set the target and plan and act. So therefore the support is very important. And the first guide that I would give for enhancing knowledge with my suppliers would be this. If it's one guide I would use, it's the business playbook, because it's how a company aligns with a 1.5 degree ambition in its different parts of its organization, but also how you can affect society and work with your portfolio. So this I always sent along with a request for companies to set climate targets. It was the business playbook. So it's really easy to use and very short. It's a tiny little booklet, really. So it introduces you to this whole topic. But if you want to go further than that, it's very probable that some of your suppliers at least are working with transportation, that they have that in their own business or they have it in their supply chains. So transportation may also be something that they should learn more about, or align between different parts of the organization. And this is also, of course, a suitable guide if you in procurement are working with transportation and buying transportation. But of course, it's important for your suppliers to know this too, especially if it's high on the agenda for you, maybe. And then another thing that we don't talk about it very much now, maybe at least not in the circles I am in, it is circularity. And maybe I think it's maybe a bit old-fashioned. People think about recycling newspapers and so on, but we need to think about the net zero target. If our companies are going towards net zero, in that world, the company needs to be near fully circular. So circularity is something that we maybe need to push up to the surface a little bit more. And this guide is written in the language of the company. I mean, how a company usually speaks. That's where I come from too. It's about the value chain, how you usually put it into a picture from Star Trend and so on. But it's how you create a value chain to fit into the world of circularity. So it's speaking the business language rather than the environmental language, which will make it easier for the C-level and other business-oriented people to understand how to work with circularity. So, gosh, I'm taking so much time now. But another something probable in your with your suppliers is that they also have suppliers. So Oliver, you mentioned the supplier action guide, and this is of course suitable for you here in this call, but it's also suitable for your suppliers because they also have suppliers. So for them to know how to work with their suppliers is also super important. And then we get this cascading effect that we want to have so we can reach those 330 million companies in the world. So this is also a very good guide. And it talks about how you engage, how you choose suppliers to work with, etc. And then going back to the very small suppliers or the small to medium suppliers, up to 500, they need a different kind of support. And then we have the SME Climate Hub, which I strongly recommend for smaller companies. This is also something I would send to the suppliers straight away. So if you are an SME, if you want to have a target that is public, then SME Climate Hub may be the best resource for you, where you can make a commitment. You can do the simplified SME type reporting for climate, which is public, and you get the guidance that is suitable for SMEs. So here are some tools. I think that was all that I wanted to show. So basically, when you interact with suppliers, ensure that they get the support that they need so they can reduce emissions, so that you also reach your targets for your company. And I think, yeah, that was it. I'll skip this one. It's renewable energy. You can find it on our webpage, but this is more for you if you're concerned about renewable energy, which I probably am certain that you are, but we'll take that some other time. Thank you. Back to you, Oliver.
Thanks, Louise. That was excellent, as always. And just to reiterate, I've added the links to the guides and the tools in there. But the work of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative and the wonderful members of their 1.5 Supply Chain Leaders Program is absolutely some of the best resources out there. I think the work that you do and that you're now starting to do as you dive into renewable energy and transportation is proving really, really useful. So I'd highly recommend it to everybody else as well. A good point by Paul at IBM is, have we already overshot 1.5 degrees? And I think the answer certainly last year is yes, but it is about trying to keep going and keeping it low. Every 0.1 degree means a massive impact on the future of people's lives, migration, crops, everything. So don't let anyone feel defeated because every single degree matters, or 0.1 of a degree matters. So just thought I'd make an emphasis on that. So in case anyone's feeling some doom and gloom, but we've got to keep positive, Paul. So next up, I believe, is Diane. Over to you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Ollie. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Really happy to be sharing today with you the Climate Drives. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. Hopefully you will see it soon.
And the Climate Drive is a fantastic resource. It's one I've been involved in for a while as well. Ultimately, if we can put all the resources, all the best case studies on net zero in one place, that'll help you as a company, but also potentially your suppliers to have no excuses about not being able to understand what to do. So, sorry, Diane, over to you.
No, thank you. With such an introduction now, I need to really make you convinced that you have to contribute, use the Climate Drive. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So maybe just before, what is the Climate Drive? The Climate Drive is a digital platform we are building together at WBCSD. It's really meant to be a first stop for businesses to confidently move from climate ambition to action. And it tries to optimize along those four main dimensions you can see here. First, being a trusted place where you're confident you can find up-to-date, high-quality resources built by experts from WBCSD, but also all our network of experts. Second, really focusing on the business needs. So it's really shaped with and for businesses, really to support buying internally, giving economics details so that it really helps to drive decision. Actionable, because that's, of course, critical in terms of resources. So it's also a really strong focus on implementation. And I will come back to that in a minute with real case examples. And it's also why we need you. And finally, accessible. Of course, it's free, it's open, and it's also optimized for mobile and also available in different languages, as you will see. Now, I really invite you to scan this QR code or go on the climatedrive.org, and I'm going to give you a little tour of what do we have on the Climate Drive and what is available for you to use internally or maybe with your suppliers. So I hope now you can see my screen. It's going to charge in minutes. So welcome to the Climate Drive. So what you're seeing here is also a first version. So it's important, I think, for you to know that we are building it with businesses, and also you're invited as part of the session to join maybe a public user test session we want to organize to keep, I would say, shaping the Climate Drive to your needs and shaping the next stage of the Climate Drive. On the Climate Drive, we have two main features I believe are highly relevant for you, especially as part of how to engage and upskill your suppliers. The first one is the Net Zero Guidebook, and it's really meant to be a step-by-step guidance to get started, but also to progress along the net zero journey. So you're probably familiar with those steps: how to prepare your organization, measure your footprint, set targets, reduce, and reports. What is important to know about this is really meant to be this place where you can find the latest guidance, up to date, really simple, and of course relying on the best practices. So for example, here in terms of measure and verify, of course it's based on the GHG protocol. It doesn't repeat, but it really guides how you can use the GHGP. And also it really helps to understand what are the next stage. So for example, if you want to increase your maturity or use product carbon footprints, for example, it's going to be explained by my colleague Nicolas in the next session. So that's for the Net Zero Guidebook, really available step-by-step guidance. You can use it all the time. And also important to mention, it's available in different languages. So for now we have Spanish and Portuguese, because we know it's really important in terms of accessibility to the different concepts to translate in different languages. And we're going to have soon more languages such as Turkish, traditional Chinese as well. Now, coming back to the English version, and I'm going to go to the action library, which is, I think, the maybe most exciting piece of the Climate Drive, because here we have an unlimited potential in terms of sharing best practices that are really helping business to take action. Here, we have more than 100 resources already. They're all built in the same way. So templates are following all the same structure that you can see here, for example, on the left. So of course, explaining what is the solution, who is using this already. But most importantly, we have two things. We have the impact, of course, on climate, because that's the main angle of the action, but also business in terms of benefits, but also sometimes in terms of costs. So really helping the user to get buy-in internally, and also, for example, to support quotes and so on. And the last section that is also very important is the implementation. So really also giving the keys to any user to understand for which type of profile is it relevant, who are the key stakeholders to engage internally, externally, as well as maybe key parameters, challenges they might expect along the journey. So really helping the user to get started on the journey, get buying internally. So that's for the current version of the Climate Drive. Now, I'd love to share with you a little bit more how you can use it, especially for, I would say, as a procurement professional. So here you can see maybe three main ways I believe that might be relevant for you. The first one is really, you have this first place to ensure, for example, you ask your suppliers are aligned with latest best practices in terms of science-based target setting, for example, or transition planning and so on. So really stay up to date with the latest best practices, and also eventually identify priority levers for your supplier. The second part, I guess, it's really related to the action library. So you can check out regularly. We're going to expand the action library to more than 300 resources. And so you can really also have some inspiration, look at what peers are doing, because it's not only keys provided by consultants, but it's also provided by companies sharing their best practices along the journey. And finally, it can also help you to prepare suppliers' conversation. For example, better anticipating trade-offs, challenges they might face, thanks to the implementation section as well. As I mentioned, we are just getting started. So in 2024, we are going to expand the content offering, but also the functionalities and enhancing the user experience. So really also inviting you, as we will see on the next page, to really take part of this journey. So now, call to action for you. So this tool is really open, it's free, and we keep developing it. So really, please get started, use it, and give us also your feedback. So first, maybe you can use this QR code or reach out to us. We're going to drop a link also in the chat. So really happy to hear from you how you want to use it. If you just want to keep posted about the next development. And finally, I think wants to mention there is also a great opportunity for you, but also maybe to refer to your suppliers to get rewarded by publishing on the Climate Drive. So you've seen in the action library, we have a lot of resources, and they're also from businesses really sharing best practices. So it's really also a great, I think, opportunity for you, but also for your suppliers to get, I would say exposure, be profiled as leading businesses who is taking climate action. Of course, we have a full process behind. I dropped in the resource library here the process to submit a case study. So feel free also to have a look and get in touch, and we'd be very happy to publish a best practice in it. And I think that's it in terms of the climate drive for today. Feel free to drop questions in the chat, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Diane, as always. That's superb. So we've looked at a resource that helps you understand how well you're doing internally and how to help get buy-in internally and perhaps get more resource. We've now heard about more supplier engagement guides and more supplier engagement best practice. We've now starting to see some of the resources that you can actually send to suppliers too, so they don't have any excuses about not having any resources or things that they can do. But now, obviously, we need to start thinking about data. Data is obviously critical to Scope 3. But I'm sure everyone's had a million pitches from demos and platforms and tools, and everyone wants to see those tools and platforms and those data standards aligning. And this is where Diane's colleague Nicolas and his team come in with the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. So, Nicolas, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Ollie. Very happy to be here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present PACT, and hopefully this comes as a relevant tool that you can use in your own activities after a series of very valuable tools that we've just heard. So let me introduce you to the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. So our ambition is to help companies understand clearly their upstream emissions on a product level. But to make Scope 3 abatement possible, one of the prerequisites is that companies, as Ollie mentioned, have access to accurate, granular, and comparable data. I often use, and I've heard, this is not mine, but I've heard someone share the analogy that you wouldn't go on a diet if you were using an average weight of a person similar to you to monitor your diet and losing weight. So it's the same for companies losing at decarbonisation in their value chain. You need accurate data that reflect real emissions incurred on your value chain and based on primary data. You need granular data that is linked to specific products that you produce and that you procure from. And you need comparable data so that you can make sure that you're comparing apples to apples and also aggregating data that is consistent and comparable when receiving this data from your suppliers. So we believe that there are 3 building blocks required to create product-level carbon transparency in a value chain. The first one is a globally applicable methodology to calculate product carbon footprint, meaning that all companies would use a similar approach or aligned approach to calculate their own product carbon footprint, creating this way improved and enhanced data quality at the product level and creating the accuracy and comparability needed. Once this data is calculated and you've actually created qualitative data, the data needs to flow throughout the value chain and from one tier of company to the other tier all the way downstream following the product itself. And for this data to flow, we need a technical infrastructure that enables the data to flow between different IT systems. Similarly, also use a different analogy here. If we would all be using different email solutions, if I'm using a specific one and Oliver is using a different one, if my email cannot get into his inbox, then we are losing communication. So it's really important that the data can flow throughout the value chain, regardless of what IT solutions a specific company uses. And of course, a prerequisite of all of this is value chain collaboration. And for this, you've heard excellent tools just before me with the Climate Drive, and also just before with Louise presenting, really needed this collaboration, increased collaboration within the value chain to make it all possible. So this is where I'm introducing the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. Our goal is really to empower corporates and their value chain to make smart carbon informed decisions at product level. And to do this, we are sharing today 2 of our key foundational documents. The first one is a guidance on how to calculate product carbon footprint in a harmonized way. So creating this data quality that I was speaking before. At this point, this guidance is sector agnostic, but you will see later on that we also very much collaborate with industry-specific initiative to create sector-specific methodologies but we are proposing and suggesting having an overarching approach that creates alignment on how to calculate product carbon footprint. It's not something new. It's not new calculation methodology. It's something that is building on existing standards like the GHG protocol and ISO standards, but gives a little bit more specificity and helps companies navigate the different standards to ensure that in the end, the data calculated is consistent and of high quality. And lastly, as I mentioned, it supports industry-specific methodologies. Today, there are over 900 companies using this and exchanging already 1,000 PCFs using this methodology. The second part is the Pathfinder network, which is essentially an API that is publicly available that allows any IT solution that supports exchange of PCF data to be interoperable, meaning that even if you use a different solution than your supplier, if you both have solutions that are pact conformant or use the API, then there's interoperability and the data can flow from one another. So essentially, this enables peer-to-peer data exchange. And we are not creating a platform that hosts data, but we're enabling different platforms or different solutions exchange data when they want to. Today, there are over 20 pact conformant solutions available in the market and that you can choose from. Also, companies are looking at building their own IT solutions in-house, and they can also go through pact conformance to ensure that they can then exchange data with other IT solutions. So a little bit in practice, just to share how these tools have been used so far. In 2023, we've had the first set of companies using the implementing the Pathfinder framework to calculate PCF with their suppliers, and also the tools to exchange the data. As I mentioned, around 900 companies were participating, more than 1,400 PCFs were exchanged. But more importantly, those companies using the pact approach noticed a 37% on average improvement in data accuracy from using primary data versus secondary data. So this comes back to the beginning of the discussion. When we are using primary data, of course, we see that the accuracy is much stronger, and that can give you actually the monitoring power to decide where you want to decarbonize. On the right side of the slide, you'll see an example of Fujitsu and their value chain using pact. Using different solutions, all conformant solutions throughout different tiers of their value chain. And the outcome at the end of this exercise last year was they got a product carbon footprint data for Fujitsu laptop screen based on primary data. So of course, by providing methodology and the network, the pact empowers organizations to make carbon business decisions. As you can see here, there are many different use cases of why you would want to have accurate data. And of course, procurement being one of the top reasons on why this data is so important for your engagement with your suppliers. You can understand carbon intensity, embed carbon intensity in supplier selection, identify sourcing opportunities. You can embed this into contract negotiations, partner with your suppliers to help and support them decarbonize using other tools that were presented today, for example. And so with that, I hope that I've convinced you to at least look at what we're doing with Impact, try to test it. It's all freely available and accessible in the resource page. And very happy to hear if you're interested in learning more. We are very happy to always get feedback and understand how we can further support creating this carbon transparency at product level in value chains. Thanks a lot, and back to you, Oliver.
Yeah, thanks, Nicolas. That's excellent. And yeah, absolutely vital that I think most of the critical solutions in the market that understand the work of pact, particularly with product carbon footprinting, obviously. And it's great to see so many becoming pact conformant now. And again, I think anyone that's looking at product carbon footprints, it's crucial that the solutions that you're looking at are at least talking to the pact program, if not conformant, because we must all get completely aligned on this. This is going really well, both in terms of timing and resources. I think everyone's overwhelmed with links and resources and stuff. That's what we want. So there's plenty of stuff to go around. So over to you, Alessandro. Now, I think you guys can bring pact to life even more as well. And I think the chemicals industry, of course, very close to the SPP's heart, is doing some great stuff on this. In fact, I don't think there is an industry doing more and better on product carbon footprinting than the chemicals industry, which you could argue is very important because chemicals is in absolutely everything. And Alessandro, you've been at the heart of this for for quite a while now. So delighted to have you on here as well. Before you start, Alessandro, there was one question that I know Sandra's asked, which is about what maturity level in terms of GHG inventory is needed with a PCF calculation. So we'll come to that towards the end of your presentation as well. So over to you, Alessandro.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to SPP. When we learned in the sessions before this one that sustainable transformation is fundamentally a collaboration game, especially the presentation of Luis and Nicolas were showing that. And here I will have the opportunity to show you how a collaboration within an industry, in this case, the chemical industry, along the lines of Together for Sustainability Association, can work and what it can achieve. Let's now move into the next slides. And first of all, what is Together for Sustainability? Together for Sustainability is an association which in fact exists since longer than 10 years. And it has been focused since inception on sustainability excellence in procurement. And the mantra behind Together for Sustainability work is what can we achieve more by acting together rather than just competing among each other, right? So the work of TFS is always pre-competitive, and it deals with fundamentally sustainability and sustainable transformation. How does relate to greenhouse gas emissions reduction? Obviously, everybody, and especially an industry which is a high emitting, like the chemical industry, wants to reduce and tries to reduce its carbon footprint. And that's particularly important that this happens in the chemical industry, because as Oliver was mentioning, nearly all manufacturing goods that you and I buy anywhere contain chemical raw materials in it. So if you want to have really purchase climate conscious products, you need to have climate conscious chemicals in it. Okay, so everybody wants to reduce the carbon footprint, but how to do it without a way to measure where you stand? How to do it without having a standard? How to do it without having data? And exactly this was the question that each and every member of Together Sustainability asked itself in the last couple of years, and led to the development of the toolkit that I would soon introduce to you. And let's basically show you the two key elements of the toolkit of Together for Sustainability. As Nicolas was already showing in the case of PACT, is fundamentally very similar, right? You need to have a clear standard, right? A clear way to determine product carbon footprint, and to have, as far as possible, an apple-to-apple comparison. And on the other side, you need to have powerful tools and efficient tools to exchange data along the value chain, because product carbon footprint is nothing that you can measure in a lab. It's something that you have to calculate based on data that you get from your supplier, from the supply chain. So how to do that? Together for Sustainability developed, first of all, a very detailed guideline, sectoral specific, going one level deeper than the let's say, a generic standard, in order to increase the level of consistency and comparability, achieve this apple-to-apple comparison, while keeping, obviously, the anchoring on the generic standard behind the ISO standard, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, or the PAC standard, the PAC framework that Nicolas has just introduced. And after having developed such a guideline, which is freely available in the homepage of Together for Sustainability, also launching together with a technology partner, Siemens, a SaaS digital platform to have an efficient exchange and secure exchange of product carbon footprint across members and non-members of Together for Sustainability along the value chain. Exactly such tool will enable to have access to data that are so difficult to come by today, and data which are not only calculated into a standard fashion, but have also been shared in a conventional way, not having each and every company developing its own questionnaire to request product carbon footprint information from their own supplier. So let's just focus in the last slide on the guideline, just to show you that collaboration is not sufficient if it's just within your industry, especially for an industry like the chemical industry, which is serving so many verticals, industry vertical sectors downstream, automotive industry, building and construction, pharma, packaging, and many, many, many others. And you need to have a standard which is, you could say, drop-in applicable into other sector, meaning if when you want to determine the carbon footprint of a chemical which goes into a packaging or an automotive component, you want to have it calculated in the same way, according to the same standard. And that's where this Together for Sustainability PCF guideline comes into play, and where the collaboration also beyond the borders of an industry is crucial in order to get consistent product carbon footprints along the several value chains. Here this illustration with a puzzle indicates exactly that and shows also how the Together for Sustainability guideline relates, for example, with a PAC framework that Nicolas was just showing in the presentation prior to mine. I will be very happy now to get your questions together with my fellow panelists and have some discussions on the toolkit which we can provide to you and in order to make your Scope 3 journey more successful.
Thanks, Alessandro. So definitely, there's a couple of questions for you, and I think Nicolas, you may be able to distribute, and maybe others. So let's come to that question about what sort of level of maturity do you need to have to start looking at product carbon footprints from your suppliers? So, it's a bit of a daunting prospect, isn't it? Looking at product carbon footprinting, let alone asking your suppliers for that information. So, Alessandro, what sort of maturity do you think people need to have to be able to get started on looking at PCFs?
I would say that you need, of course, a rather holistic approach, right? It's not just looking at the product carbon footprint of a supplier. You also need to have an understanding, for example, of what is your own footprint, right? You need to understand, first of all, how the raw material play out into your corporate footprint. So this type of homework is, of course, necessary to calibrate. But then fundamentally, in order to engage your supply base and collect product carbon footprint, it's important that you acquire certain competencies, which in some organizations already exist in the procurement function, but in some other are not yet there. And I'm talking about, for example, at least basic life cycle assessment knowledge, which is crucial in order to understand the data that at some point you will receive from your supplier and being able to judge and interact with your supplier to see A, how reliable this data is, and B, how this product carbon footprint can eventually be reduced.
Excellent. Nicolas, I'm going to come to you. Jamie, I'm then going to come to you about Andrew's question about getting internal resource, and maybe Louise, you can touch upon that. And then there's a question, obviously, about the use of unspecific databases and whether we can eventually use AI and everything else. So, Nicolas, any thoughts to build upon that question of how mature you need to be on product carbon footprints, or where do you start?
Yeah, no, thanks. Definitely, Alessandro was very comprehensive on that. I think there's definitely a need for a basic understanding and capacity on the procurement side, on the supplier engagement side, on the suppliers themselves. But I'd also add that you also need to start. You don't need for it to be perfect in order to start. It's definitely a journey. The first iterations of PCF calculations and exchange will not bring you the perfect quality data yet, but it's only by starting and understanding how to improve the way you calculate your PCF, to improve the data that you gather, how you connect with your suppliers, then you will gradually enhance the quality of the data that you have. So I'd suggest, of course, starting as soon as possible and then having this open mindset of embracing uncertainty in the final aim to increase the data that you have available.
Excellent. So Jamie, and then quickly Louise, how do you get buy-in internally to look at Scope 3? And I mean, there certainly isn't a shortage of free resources you can use, that's for sure. Jamie, your thoughts?
So I think Andrew's question refers to FTEs. Is that correct? I think fundamentally, when we've looked at the data, most organisations are not investing enough resources to tackle Scope 3. I think the leading organisations have recognised that this is a collective problem internally, and they're fundamentally making Scope 3 part of more people's jobs. So that means not just sustainability or a few passionate people in procurement. It's about making sure that sourcing managers are incorporating carbon emissions into their supplier evaluations. Once it's post-contract, making sure that it's part of the supply management process. And this is a complicated thing to get right, but I think that this is where we need to start changing organisation design to accommodate the amount of supplier engagement that's required.
Yeah, and this is a very common question, Louise, isn't it? About how do we get buy-in internally? It's the age-old question, isn't it? So, any thoughts on that, Louise?
Yeah, two things from me is when I did this, we were a bit cheeky. Me and the head of sustainability, we managed to get it as a company-wide target. Which was fantastic. And we started in a very kind of structured way with supplier engagement. We will ensure that this many suppliers have a climate target. And that is kind of a very well-defined and scoped way of starting. And it's kind of small-ish. And it all depends how many suppliers you will ask and so on. But I would suggest that the top level management ensuring that gets in there. But when you start small and manageable and start by investigating. And when you have this, if you have a target that is kind of small, it will grow eventually. But if you get going, then you will also get buy-in. Most probably you will start getting buy-in from more and more people who will learn, they will engage. You will find these really engaged people that want to work with this, that starts up their own activities. And that's what I saw when I was working with this, that it kind of spread. And then you realize, okay, we need to start working with materials. And then we started working with materials in a small scale, then that will grow and so on. So it will require a lot of people, but also not only those specifically working with this, more integrating this as a common way of working, just as you work with security and quality and cost. It needs to come in there eventually, but I think you still are going to need to have the experts on the side, because no one will be or not everyone will be experts in sustainability in your procurement department. You can just that's a given, because it's such a very difficult area and huge. So that was a very long answer, but high level buy-in and starting very small and manageable.
Yeah,
tips.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not easy. And like everyone's saying in the chat, I mean, I know Larissa and Andrew know full well the challenge of engaging internally, and they're doing a good job on it, by the way. But it is difficult. And as you're right, the SBTI makes it easy to set targets and doesn't always make it easy to tackle it. But I'm conscious of time, everyone, but certainly the answer for a lot of people is the fact that there's plenty of free resources, almost too many resources available. When I look at the resources page in there is plenty. So just to narrow that down a little bit, Alessandro and team are going to be on a product carbon footprinting clinic next week on the 27th of March. If you go into the resources page, you can find the link to that session. It's all free. Hundreds and hundreds of people will be coming to that, and we're going to be doing pure Q&A on product carbon footprint. So no excuses there to get your questions answered. I'm sure you're going to be studying all week, Alessandro, for that one. Nicolas, I know you and your team, Joy is going to be on that call as well. As I said, a lot of the case studies of work that people have been doing will be available on the Climate Drive. So do check out the climatedrive.org. Louise and team at Exponential Roadmap, there definitely isn't any excuses about how to engage suppliers. There's plenty of resources there. I would ask anyone to go that's got small and medium-sized suppliers, or is there a small to medium-sized company themselves, to get to SMEclimatehub.org. There is plenty of resources there. And in fact, if everyone sent their suppliers to the SME Climate Hub that are SMEs, then perhaps we get much more consistency on that. There's also a fantastic new resource in the SME Climate Hub where you can actually see which of your SME suppliers have reported and gone through the SME Climate Hub, which is an excellent new step for the SME Climate Hub. So you can now see the results of your efforts to push your SMEs suppliers to that. And of course, as I said, Jamie and team at Proxima, scope3benchmark.com is another great resource. I also chair the Scope 3 peer group, which is running the cleaning next week. It's all free resources for anyone that's a Scope 3 practitioner. So if you go to scope3peergroup.com, on there, I've included a number of template case studies, including Christoph's from Schneider Electric, which everyone takes pictures of when they go to conferences. So that's there to be downloaded and borrowed and used. So thank you to all of this wonderful panel. You've been fantastic again. This is the third year of the Scope 3 Toolkit session. I'm sure that it will continue to evolve and hopefully will continue to produce better resources. But thanks, Alessandro, Nicolas, Diane, Louise, Jamie, as always, really appreciate it. And I'm sure you'll all stick around for the rest of World Stone Procurement Day. I'm off to go around and have a look around Memphis and Nashville. But in the meantime, enjoy, everyone. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.